Hey, it's me again, Alice. I want to talk to you some more about theoretical physics. This is stuff you absolutely can understand because this is Physics 101, and you know what? The Quantum Physics 101. And guess what? Quantum physics, the laws of quantum physics are completely different than any of the other laws of physics. So you don't have to even know anything about any of the other stuff to start with the quantum and learning about that. And then guess what? It's really fun. And if you're a person who meditates and is remotely interested in like this language or this video, then you probably are going to get some downloads also about stuff that turns out to be quantum physics. And you're going to see all these spiritual people talking about these things. We talk about, so consciousness is actually a state of being. And, just for your knowledge, special knowledge, angels are representative of a state of consciousness. So each angel has different qualities that correspond to when they come in, but it's a spirit from on high. It's a higher vibrational spirit that can come in and offer this shift and change in consciousness, such that people have these revelations. There are major things that happen to them. You think about Mother Mary having Angel Gabriel come to her, and she received, this change in her state of consciousness, which enabled her to manifest an immaculate conception. It's her in her heart. And I furthermore think that she had a relationship with Joseph, which was just not acknowledged officially, because that would have meant that they didn't have to register on the census, and they wouldn't have to, so nobody would report that she was a person who had a baby. And she knew that it was a Christed baby. And I think that she was also, just as Mary Magdalene was, I think that Mother Mary was probably into Tantra, into like Gnostic relationship with God, which is like she is representative of the divine feminine. So it follows that she would have had this kind of connection with God. And so much so that she, through her love in her heart, she was able to manifest, through her love, probably even maybe for Joseph, she was able to manifest this baby immaculately, who turns out to come in with Christ consciousness, because if you immaculately conceive, that means that there's no karma when the person comes in. So you start out at the level of Christ consciousness, and it's nearly impossible to knock you back down. And likewise, Mary Magdalene was also into this Tantra stuff that Mother Mary was probably eventually interested in, which is like how you channel your sexual energy into more of a creativity. And especially women are really powerful because we have the womb space and we can do the ultimate creation. And that's why we've always been silenced. It's because we're really more powerful than men. And if you've ever given birth to a child, you absolutely know this is true. And we love them, but it's not the same thing as being a woman and what you can do with your body if you're a woman. So speaking of states of consciousness, so is the polarity where you're polarized in the divine masculine or the divine feminine. That's another axis of consciousness on a spectrum. I wanted to talk a little bit also, more to the point of what I wanted to talk about so I was going back to Quantum Physics 101. So I want to talk in theoretical physics, I should say, because this is the stuff that you might learn more in a philosophy 101 class. So bear with me and it'll get around to physics, but you can talk about philosophy in such a way as to convey the knowledge of the actual physics, because all the physics is theoretical when it comes to quantum physics. So bear with me. So there is, in the 3D realm, where we are, there was always this sense that, there are a couple of different perspectives that have always been discussed in the realm of philosophy as to whether everything how causality comes into our experience, and what can really affect change, what can cause something else can cause an arrow to move. What is it that really causes that arrow to move? Is it the spring back of the string, or is it the pull that you put on your fingers? Is it the airspeed and the wind things coming through, and other, if it ricochets off something? Is it all those things? And then that gets down to, okay, what is that? Like, you have potential energy because you pull back the string. So keep going back. This is the butterfly effect. It's like, and this is retracing it. And so there's this school of thought that's called determinism, and there's another school of thought that's called indeterminism, which is where we're going to get in a minute. Okay, so in deterministic philosophy, there is like the butterfly effect happens, and there's an original flutter, and everything after that is a cascade of fragmented experiences of consciousness, fragmented experiences of energy. So when this happens, there is this assumption that every single, you have to assume, I mean, if you believe in determinism, you assume that every single thing that happens is basically could be predetermined, because it's directly caused by things that are around it. And then if you keep going, there's a cause and a cause and a cause and a cause, and there's some kind of physics that makes something else happen to, you light there's gunpowder and you pull the trigger, and like at what point are you actually, and then there's the, putting it to your shoulder, holding your hand on I don't like using examples of guns, but it's like an efficient way to kind of think about this. Okay, so in the 3D realm, there's this perspective called determinism where, like I said, it's like everything is determined, and there is no such thing as chance. There's no such thing as free will. So free will is using your consciousness to actually affect change and make changes in your environment. So it's like free will versus determinism, free will, indeterminism. So let's think though about this. Do the thought experiment with me now, maybe about doing the arrow, because that's a little less violent. And it's a classic example. So you pull back the arrow, and it actually, so you can do the butterfly effect and determine the exact physics of how that arrow is shot. But what you can't do is retrace and identify when there's a thought that generates the idea, the impulse to even pull back the arrow in the first place, much less the connected thought of, I'm going to go to the range and go shoot some arrows, or the connected thought, like, I'm going to get up today and I think I'm going to do that, and on the way I'm going to, and so blah 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 blah. Like, you can come up with, okay, there's always thought that's running along, and so what is that is like seemingly causing, or it's at least correlated with the events that happen. So let's say it's correlated because it actually, you think something and you want to pull back the arrow, and it's like instantaneously, because it's your intention to pull back the arrow, and your thoughts channel, your energy channels into your body, creating these electric impulses that cause you to be able to pull back the arrow. But how does this work? Because if there's thought, if there really is thought, and let's say it actually does cause the arrow, to cause you to pull back the arrow and shoot the arrow, if it's thought that's doing that, where is the energy of thought? How does that work? Because we can't identify how We can identify electrical pulses in neurons, but we cannot identify where thought actually comes from. And it's because, you know what, thought is an aspect of the quantum field. Thought is actually the most high vibrational energy, and it translates to, or consciousness itself, and that awareness that gives you the ability to have an impulse to do something is where it gets into, okay, you can actually make something happen without using the regular laws of physics. Do you see where I'm doing that? So you can actually have the, if it's your thought and your ability to then follow your thought, your body to train with your thought and go along with what you want it to do, you then pull back the arrow, and and you notice that there is an original thought that makes that happen, and that thought causing your body to do these things, that middle between thought and between the 3D, between their spirit and between the 3D, there is no identified friction. And in everything else in the 3D realm, you have to have friction in order to, or you do have friction in order to get stuff to move. Like, you have to have a certain degree of friction. There's no, moving stuff around generates energy. Even if you pick something up, you have to be able to use friction and use gravitational pull in the electromagnetic field to be able to move something. And you know what the electromagnetic field is, when we get into, that's where humans actually have the ability to have effect on their environment in a completely free will sort of way. So not only is our reality clearly not deterministic, because you see how thought and consciousness can actually affect stuff in our reality, meaning, and thought is not predictable. Thought is actually not, there's no way to predict the reaction and the emotions, the psychological reaction to life that constitutes the experience of a soul. That's on a quantum physics level, and we're thinking of soul work, but this is just because scientists don't use their language to talk about the same stuff. But a soul is a very, very powerful, advanced electromagnetic field that's able to manifest in the 3D and transgress all of the dimensions. So your soul is like your higher self, and it's actually a really powerful electromagnetic field. And the more consciousness that you can generate in this life, the more free will that you exercise, the more things that you do with your free will that are actually through love. You have to vibrate at a level where you are exuding love, and that's the standpoint that you manifest from. If you're doing that, you're constantly expanding your consciousness, which is to raise your vibration, to raise the vibration of an electric circuit, which is what our body is. Our body circuits electricity, and there is an electromagnetic field around that, and longer that electricity is circulated, the bigger and bigger your field gets. So it's like, actually, your brain and your neurological system are manifesting what your decisions are doing, on your free will is doing, your soul is doing in these higher dimensions, because the dimensions are all around us. It's dimensions of our reality, so different perspectives on reality where there are different laws of physics. And this is why, and the only way to talk about quantum physics is in this theoretical free will state of mind. You're not looking at things. Okay, my phone died for a second, so let me try to weave that together. So that's determinism. Everything is determined, predetermined. So then if you think about it though, so keep rolling with it. If you think about it, if you're really questioning this and picking it apart, there's this idea of like, well, what if our thoughts are actually just following along what's happening, and they are there, but they're not actually what affects our environment, our conscious thought. Maybe it's just overlays our reality, but doesn't actually cause effect or affect the reality, as it were. So, but okay, so that would mean that we don't actually have free will. All right, so it's another deterministic point of view. But then if you keep going, you're like, okay, but so thinking, thought being the thing that causes, is able to affect change in the 3D world, what if, I mean, who is really doing the thinking? That's the thought. So it's like, okay, so if we don't really, we're just following along our thoughts, then who is the person, what is the being who's doing the thinking, who is aware of those thoughts and aware of the thinking? Descartes talked about this as like, I think, therefore I am. And it is more of a modern perspective to kind of use a little bit of different language, which I think is kind of silly because it was in French, and I think that was the terminology of the day. But like, instead of I think, therefore I am, it could be like I am aware, therefore I am that I am, is the most beautiful, simple way. But so does that mean that there is somebody who is ultimately controlling everything? Because what do you get beyond that? If this is all controlled by our thoughts and we're not in control of our thoughts, but there's actually a big being that's generating our thoughts, then maybe it does mean that there is free will. Like maybe the being that is aware has free will and is controlling our thoughts, which control our environment. So this is called indeterminism, which means that everything is not predestined. There's actually free will. So these two perspectives interweave with each other because you can argue both of them. But what we bring to this when we talk about quantum physics is that once you get, so everything is energy, and when you energetically affect change on something, you make something happen in the 3D, you are accessing the quantum field of potential energy. So you are taking energy from the quantum, transforming it into thoughts, and then choosing to affect change on whatever it is, whether it's like pulling the arrow or pulling the string back on the arrow or whatnot. So this is where you can actually do things in the quantum, which is the 4D and above, in the quantum field, without actually needing to have any friction. That's what's very interesting about the quantum versus 3D, is that in the quantum, in order to affect change and to affect what happens in the 3D, you don't actually need any friction to be able to do it. You don't have to use gravity to be able to do it. You're so high vibrational, that level of consciousness is so high vibrational that it can actually come in and affect the manifestations in the 3D. And in fact, that higher consciousness is exactly what does manifest the things in the 3D. So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about free energy, when we're talking about the Akashic records. This is the quantum field. And there's a lot of different, like heaven, it's the fields of Elysium, it's all these ways of describing this ultimate place with peace and love and the ultimate knowledge, the ultimate relationship with our fellow life. So this, we find that, this is interesting. There is this realm, it seems like it's kind of a realm in which the laws of the 3D physics, the Newtonian laws of physics, don't actually apply. And so we've seen later on we've been able to show and demonstrate different particles in the quantum field and show how they show the potential of those particles and how they do affect change on the atoms and the charges transfer around. But this is all, once the energy gets above the speed of light, you enter into a whole different realm of laws of physics, in which quantum laws of physics and theoretical physics is all we can do, because everything is of infinite potential, and there is no such thing as a vacuum. Like, the entire universe is filled with this plasma energy. That's what the different dimensions are. So even though it seems like there's nothing there to us in the middle of darkest space, like, it is completely full. Those spaces are completely full of energy that can be harnessed and used if you come at it from the state of consciousness of the quantum field. And so what is this really that's doing it when we're talking about the quantum field? All right, so go back to our arrow, and you think about how do we move something, how do we make something happen in the 3D without using friction? And so we just said, well, you use a thought, and the thought directs what happens in the 3D. So that is a way of causing an effect or affecting change in the 3D environment without using any friction or gravity. So, all right, so what's the other one? The other one is electromagnetism. So magnets do not need to use friction in order to attract to each other. That is a frictionless, gravity-less attraction. And, if you put two magnets next to each other, they'll flip and pull to each other, and without you having to do anything. And so this is actually the same type of electromagnetic field that is all around us, that constitutes the quantum field, all of these other extra dimensions, or dimensions that are higher than us, where all these higher possibilities and higher states of consciousness are possible. God consciousness, just the ultimate awareness that could possibly be, is what is generating this quantum field of potential. And it has followed all of these narratives of all of these 3D people, but as we've gone on, as our electromagnetic field of the planet has developed, our quantum field has gotten larger and larger and larger, and more expansive in terms of its stories. So at some point, which is right now, we are going to hit a tipping point to where the quantum field, the energy in the quantum field, is going to be able to manifest at will in the 3D, using and has access to every single bit of knowledge that ever was, so that includes the life of trees, like the knowledge, the information, the energy of the information that tells a seed, this is what you do now, this is what you do now, this is what you do now, that tells a tree how to grow. That's the same kind of energy that has been contributing to our electromagnetic field. But so in order to be able to do this, to manifest in the 3D, which is a way of affecting major change in your reality just using your intention, is to raise your vibration, which is basically, you could look up breath of fire, look up Kundalini yoga, but mainly breath of fire, look up pranayama. These breath work things will help raise your vibration pretty quickly and oxygenate your system. You have to be careful with Kundalini energy though, because when you have an awakening, it really puts you onto another planet for a little while. And that's why a lot of people do go into hermit mode if they can, because it's just like your field of consciousness expands like logarithmically all of a sudden, and it's like as if you just saw color for the first time or saw light for the first time. It's just like so overwhelming, and you've never had this sense before. And so this is you being opening up to the potential energy of all of the other dimensions, and that's what a spiritual awakening is, where you rise to this very high level of consciousness and then vacillate until you even out at a higher state of consciousness equivalent to the vibrations of the quantum field. So we manifest with our intention. When we observe something, when we acknowledge something, that is what makes it real. That is the attention that you put into when they do studies on whether light is a wave or a particle. That it has been demonstrated that it is contingent upon whether or not that photon of light is being observed. Whether or not they're measuring it, like, will dictate whether or not it is a wave or a particle. And so even when they're not otherwise affecting or touching it, they will have somebody with a clipboard like looking at the pattern on the wall, and it changes. The pattern on the wall changes according to whether or not there's a person standing there with a clipboard. And that's like the really simple version, but that's the basic gist of what's called the double slit experiment, that shows that light is both a particle and a wave depending on whether it is observed. And that, my friends, is our intention. That is using the quantum field to collapse a waveform and turn it into something tangible, something in the 3D. So when every single time we observe our reality, we imprint that reality, and that's what is the continuous process of manifestation, which we all are in at all times. When you raise your vibration, that's when you start being able to consciously manifest and start being able to discern your choices and follow the light. That's when you get really connected in with the light, when you've raised your vibration, and that's at the point when you can start really manifesting. But when you're in lower vibration, you're not even going to be in touch with any of this stuff, because you're manifesting from this standpoint that basically creates all these just bad stuff in your life, like chaos and all the things that you don't want to happen. This is like Job in the Bible, like and not to mention Jesus. So yeah, this is what the quantum field is. This is determinism versus indeterminism. Indeterminism is the key of the quantum field, and determinism is the key to the 3D realm. And yeah, these are just some ways of talking about these things. I came to all this area of knowledge because I had such a wide expanse of interests, especially like in school, and I've always like researched and read a lot. Like growing up as a millennial, like we dove into the internet like right when it came out, and you just end up reading a bunch of stuff, and that's still the same now, but you know, it enabled me to. There were a lot of perspectives that came together to help me to understand a lot of these concepts, and usually the perspectives that I have access to, it's just because I have an understanding of systems, which is like the Hermetic principle, and so I can recognize patterns of where these areas of interest cross over, and if you're at a high vibrational level, your brain, your neural pathways do this hyper efficiently, and then you can put together these really cool pieces. And for me, this is, for example, today it's like a confluence of like philosophy 101 and quantum physics 101 and consciousness. And yeah, a little bit of flavor, I guess, electromagnetic fields, so, which is quantum physics. But all right, well, I enjoyed talking to you about philosophy. I really do. Okay, and I'll talk to you all later. Hit the like button.